Good morning, everybody. This morning we are speaking to Madi Ditmars. It is Heritage Month in South Africa, and I invited Madi to join me, Huba Boshoff, the Chief Representative of Nuffic South Africa, to share a little bit about her experience in South Africa. Madi, can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yep, I can. I'm a South African living in the Netherlands. My background is in anthropology, and I went into education specifically focusing on quality management. And as an anthropologist, this is an incredibly interesting concept to me because what is quality in education? Who determines that? And I stumbled across it specifically with the SDGs because SDG 4 sets out to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education.
For all.
For all. So whose quality, what quality? So that is where my interest lies from an anthropological point in a way.
And it's specifically this whose quality that also brought Madi to South Africa, where she spent an internship in our office here in Pretoria. Madi, could you tell us a little bit about your study? This was on Indigenous Knowledge Systems, and I'll leave it to you to give us a little bit of an explanation on what this study entailed.
Well, it was a very interesting study, Iba. I work at the African Study Center in Leiden, at Leiden University, and I completed a master's through them in, obviously, African studies. Within the master, part of it is an internship that you have to do. And I was lucky to end up doing my internship through your office in Den Haag. Sorry. And when I did that internship, one of the new OKP programs had just started, and it was the SEED program, the Strengthening Education and Agricultural Development in South Africa, had just started. So I could join them from the beginning. And as you know, I mean, those projects are a consortium of partners in that triple helix program. And I could work with the partners here, and from there, at your office, NESO, who was prepared to host me, I could from there do my research in South Africa. So, and I mean, basically, what sparked my interest is that the OKP programs are based on perceived country needs, and there's a lot of research that goes into that to compile those country-specific plans of implementation that you have. And the perception on this side that I kept on picking up from the partners in Netherlands is what they are offering South Africa are based on these identified needs. Yeah? And the question that I asked them is, but what need in agriculture are you addressing? And I mean, the obvious answer is food security. Yeah? But there's a binary conflict in food security because I mean, security based on a kind of a new Malthusian thing of limited resources and growing populations, or are we looking at food security? And that is a bottom-up approach that actually promotes indigenous practices as an alternative means to food production. But that concept is not included. So this thing of whose need is it? What need are you addressing? Then obviously brought me back to my education thing of, the need for a decolonized education, a need for an Africanization in education. I mean, does that feature in the program? Yeah, where does it get acknowledged? And the answer was, they will acknowledge these things, but the demand has to come from their partners in South Africa. It's not up to them. And that's why I then flew to South Africa to go and talk to the partners. And I mean, my research topic or the name of my research is Fusing Knowledge Systems in Higher Education. Yeah. And I set out with a question of, to what extent are the South African or the African higher education academics actually including these so-called less authoritative sources in their curricula? And are they realizing this?
Madi, that's quite a mouthful, and it's really interesting to hear how you look at something like the Orange Knowledge Program and how that links into the South African context to Africanization, to decolonization, topics that are so relevant and contextual within the South African context of internationalization of higher education. I'm really curious to hear, what did you find in this study?
Well, Huba, I was very glad in the beginning when I started speaking to people. I did a very small, just within the seed partner organizations that I spoke to, and I did more in depth. It wasn't a quantitative, yeah, I really did a deep in-depth discussions with people. And all the people I spoke to propagated a balanced approach in education, and that it should address local needs and it should incorporate local knowledge in that. Yeah. But they ran into challenges on how do you really do this on an academic front. Yeah? And I can share them with you. I mean, one of the challenges that was mentioned by Vinay Raya, you know, from IASA, was starting off with, well, what do we mean when we talk about Indigenous knowledge? And I'll show you a short clip. Just get that on. Share my screen.
What is the definition of Indigenous? What constitutes you being? I'm Indigenous South African, even though people keep talking to me about India. I have no connection to the place. I have no ancestors living there. I have nobody that I even know there to go visit there. I'm South African, proudly. So, am I Indigenous to South Africa? Most certainly.
I mean, that was the first issue that was raised. Indigenous, what are we talking about? Who's Indigenous? And those kind of problems. The second question that they were battling with was really, where do they find this? You know, it's undocumented, it's unverified. Where do they find this knowledge? And Mary Peters of Elangeni, the TVET college, she actually voiced it very well. And I will show you a short clip of how she said that.
And exacerbated and aggravated by the fact that a lot of this was passed down through an oral tradition. It wasn't written down. You know? So I think that as well is critical, because for us to be able to say we want to talk about Indigenous knowledge as opposed to Western knowledge, or in balance with Western knowledge, do we know, do we still remember, do we know what we need to know, and do we know what we've forgotten?
I also spoke to a young and very charismatic man working for the Utingo Organic Training Academy, who went up to Impangeni area, where they were working on agro-industry, farming. And his point was that what they find in these agro farms is that people are actually producing their own food, and it's working. And his pain lies with bigger commercial farmers or the academic approaches at university who often fail. And that when their approach, an Indigenous approach that is working, for it to be accepted and to be approved, it has to be verified by those same people whose own projects often fail. Yeah.
There are methodologies that have been used by proven or written theses on by professors and people doing honors. They are looked up to even though they fail dismally. And for our methodology to be worthy of the attention, we need the people who created the methodology that failed to accredit us and say your methodology works. It's unfair that the Indigenous knowledge to be legit needs scientific knowledge to accredit it as such, which means no one will take heed of our methodologies until we have proven scientifically that these methodologies are sustainable. It's very important to put it in that perspective, because it is mostly confused that scientific knowledge is superior to indigenous knowledge prior to testing.
So, and in that, I started in my whole research getting a little bit lost of, but I wanted to go and see how they do it, and all I'm running into is problems actually preventing it happening. And then I met Prof. Hassan Kaya from the Center for Indigenous Knowledge Studies at University of KZN, who together with the Department of Science and Technology and the National Research Foundation, they've actually created a Center for Indigenous Knowledge at the university, and he is timmering away and actually making it work to start to fuse what I was looking for, indigenous knowledge. And in my discussions with him, I will show you a short clip of what he said that opened my world.
Ethics also cannot be universalized. They must be culturally specific. They must appeal to the values and cultural values of the people themselves. So that's why also knowledge systems. It must be culturally and ecologically specific. And the philosophy of education, the holistic nature is the fact that knowledge is just not among humans. It must also involve the natural environment. That is symbiotic. The Ubuntu philosophy is the principles and the values of the relationship between us as humans and the other forms of life. The environment generally, including the spiritual world, the ancestors. There are certain things which you cannot see, you cannot feel, you cannot touch, because they are beyond your knowledge, but they are part of knowledge, which Western knowledge did not take that into account.
And it basically boils down to indigenous knowledge forms part of a body of knowledge, okay, that is holistic, and it's based on physical, social, and spiritual understandings. And those understandings shape people's lives, and it informs their total sense of being, and you can't separate that. And that is what has to be infused in the education system, as a total new, over African philosophy and ontology, in a way. Yeah? And that led me to the realization of the fundamental difference between European and African knowledge systems is pertinent to the two axioms that the two continents hang on. I mean, the Descartes, I think, therefore I am, and the African Ubuntu of I am, therefore you are difference. Okay? So those were the kind of challenges that I had to deal with. I mean, there's the obvious challenges also of perceptions of being inferior. And what was also very interesting is that in spite of most of the higher education institutions in Africa, and South Africa specifically, working towards decolonizing their institutions, there's often conflicting policies and legislation. As an example, the Farmer Support Group, which is also an institution within the UKZN University, they were telling me that they support farmers to use their own seeds and work with their seeds. But they're financially supported by the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Agriculture gets seeds from Monsanto, and that gets passed on to them to use in their projects. Yeah, so these conflicts are also things that are really making it difficult for the people, for the educators to bring it in.
That's very
Those are the
interesting.
challenges.
Those are the challenges. They are also the challenges, but the challenges also gives us an opportunity to reflect. I really like how you've compared the Descartes and the Ubuntu methodologies and philosophies with one another. Madi, I started off with saying that September is Heritage Month, and we've spoken a lot now about Indigenous knowledge systems. How does that relate to heritage, in your opinion?
Well, Eva, I'm actually glad you asked me, because yeah, you know, I'm sure in this whole month of your focus on heritage, you've stumbled across the fact that most of heritage perceptions that people have of heritage are tangible things: museums, monuments, textiles, music. But the intangible aspects of heritage are the, in my perception, the most valuable. And education, I mean, we all know the axiom of education is power, and great writers like Foucault and Freire and all have illustrated with how powerful it in fact is. But if education is not based on a heritage of Indigenous knowledge, it opens up those dangerous areas and the conflicts that there are, for example, at the moment, and the perceptions that higher education is Eurocentric, it's from the West to the rest kind of approach, yeah. And through that, people feel alienated from their own higher education institutions. So I personally believe that it is one of our most valuable pieces of heritage that we have, but it's a very complex, because I mean, it's not like a building that you just have to preserve or can put in a museum. It's also a very dynamic process. It's never of this is it and here it stops. It's continuously adapting and evolving. And so, yeah, that's my link with heritage.
Fantastic. And I think that's also why it's so important that we continue a conversation about South African Dutch collaboration in education and research. Madi, it's really great to hear about your study, but I'm quite a pragmatic person. So I want to know, now at your position in Leiden, how do you use this knowledge and information that you've gathered through your study in your everyday work?
Oh, I mean, Hiba, for me, it's also important that research that is done doesn't end up in libraries, but it really gets plowed back into something that improves or betters. You know, I ran into these challenges, but I also found a lot of opportunities of things that are really happening, of people that are really trying and working towards finding ways to bring local knowledge and Indigenous knowledge on board in the academia. Okay? And things like participatory action research. I mean, it's becoming a big thing globally, not anymore to stand as an outsider and gather data and then put your evaluations, but actually to bring the people where the research is done, make them in control of the research and the outcomes of the research. You know? So from Leiden's side, I will pull that through for you now. Other things that I also found that they're doing at what was it? I just have to think. At the Agricultural College in KZN, they're doing service learning. So they're sending their students out back into the communities, and it's not going out as the old extension officers of here is this and that's what you must do. It's actually delivering a service in the community and working with the community with what they have and what they know, what works for them to improve that. And and the knowledge that the students gain there in the field is then fed back into the knowledge pool. So gradually they're starting to build up this lack of local knowledge on aspects, which I found a wonderful system. And then obviously, I mean, which is another passion of mine, is the whole technology and how that is changing and affecting education. And technology offers an even greater opportunity, because online you start seeing communities of practice evolve, starting to get together, which is a powerful space where people can explore contributions from indigenous, from local, and from global knowledge systems. Yeah, so these aspects, we bring into the courses that we offer through Africa Study Center, and I can quickly share with you the courses that I'm operating as a coordinator of education at the African Study Center. Yeah. And we offer 2 interdisciplinary minors. Yeah. These are full-time semester electives that students from Leiden University, Delft University of Technology, and Erasmus University Rotterdam. And you know, from Erasmus side, they have a very strong economic focus on things. So we select final year students and we bring them together to follow a minor in African dynamics, or also we have a minor in frugal innovation for sustainable global development. And the points that I have learned through my research in Africa is deeply interwoven in this, because I mean, obviously being a multidisciplinary minor, it is holistic. We look at things from different points. We focus on the SDGs, and the SDGs have to be, can only be achieved if it's in a system approach, you know, where things how things affect each other are all acknowledged, and not everybody still just working from their own disciplinary focuses. So these are the kind of things that we bring into the minor. Obviously, I mean, we prepare our students also for when they go further and do their own master's and doctorate research, to consider a participatory action research process. They work in communities of practice already. For example, within African Dynamics, they have a 4-week SPOC, a small private online course that they follow. And the SPOC we set up as a global classroom. So we invite students from some African universities. At this stage, just the universities that we partner with. It's University of Western Cape, SECO in Kenya, and Nimar in Rabat in Morocco, works very closely with the international university. So we invite students from these universities to work with our students in an online course where they look at aspects that are necessary for the SDGs, specifically 4 aspects. Yeah? The systems approach, participation, partnership, and adaptation is also a topic we cover. So promoting this, setting up communities of practice, of actually and sharing and collaborating and co-creating knowledge. So hopefully from our side, we can plow that back into our education and assist our students, or who will be sitting in the leading positions in a few years' time, to already have established this openness for collaboration and cooperation and partnership. Yeah.
Madi, these minors are so interesting, and to our followers out there, if you are interested to hear more about Madi's research and these 2 minors offered by the Dutch universities, we will share the links to you. And thank you for joining us. Madi, thank you so much for sharing your study with us, for really connecting with us in terms of what is heritage and that intangible part of heritage is, and for making your time available to share your study. All the best.